Imagine the greatest power of the ancient world. Its legions had crushed Carthage, conquered Greece, defeated the kingdoms of Macedonia, and stretched Roman authority across much of the Mediterranean. To the outside world, Rome appeared unstoppable. Every year its borders expanded, its wealth increased, and its enemies fell one after another. Yet the greatest threat to Rome did not come from a foreign king, an invading army, or a distant empire. It came from Rome itself. History remembers Rome for its victories over outsiders. It remembers Hannibal crossing the Alps, Julius Caesar conquering Gaul, and Augustus creating an empire that would last for centuries. But the wars that truly changed history were different. They were wars in which Roman fought Roman, neighbor killed neighbor, brother fought brother. The blood spilled on Roman soil would eventually destroy the republic that had ruled for nearly 5 centuries. Ironically, these terrible conflicts did not begin with swords.
They began with success. After defeating Carthage in the Punic Wars and expanding eastward into Greece and Asia Minor, unimaginable wealth poured into Rome. Ships arrived carrying gold, silver, priceless artwork, exotic luxuries, and hundreds of thousands of slaves captured during military campaigns. For the Roman elite, it was the beginning of an age of incredible prosperity. For ordinary citizens, it marked the beginning of disaster. For generations, the backbone of the Roman Republic had been independent farmers. These men owned small plots of land, worked their fields, and served in the army whenever Rome called. They fought because they had something worth defending. But wars were becoming longer. Instead of serving for a single campaign, many soldiers spent years fighting far from home. When they finally returned, they often found their farms abandoned. Their crops had failed, their houses had fallen apart. Debt collectors had arrived long before they had. Unable to repay what they owed, thousands of farmers were forced to sell everything. The buyers were always the same, Rome's wealthiest senators. One by one, small family farms disappeared. In their place rose enormous agricultural estates known as latifundia. These giant plantations relied almost entirely on slave labor. Slaves worked for little more than food. No free Roman farmer could compete with such cheap labor. The result was devastating. Thousands of dispossessed citizens packed their belongings and moved to Rome, hoping to find work. Instead, they found overcrowded streets, unemployment, poverty, and uncertainty. The city grew larger every year, so did frustration. A dangerous new class of citizens had emerged. Men who had the right to vote, but no land, no stable income, and little hope for the future. Roman politicians quickly realized something important. These desperate crowds could become a powerful political weapon. Offer free grain, promise land, cancel debts, and thousands would support you. Politics slowly transformed into something far more dangerous than debate. It became a struggle for mass popularity. Behind every speech stood the threat of violence. Behind every election waited armed supporters. The Republic was changing. Few understood how serious the danger had become. Among those who did were 2 brothers from one of Rome's most respected families, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Both were highly educated, both had served Rome honorably, both believed that the Republic could still be saved. Tiberius Gracchus proposed what seemed like a reasonable solution. Large amounts of public land had been illegally occupied by wealthy aristocrats for decades. He argued that the state should reclaim this land and redistribute part of it to poor Roman citizens. The plan would create new farmers, it would strengthen the army, and it would reduce growing inequality. To ordinary Romans, the proposal sounded fair. To the Senate, it sounded like revolution. Many senators owned enormous estates. If Tiberius succeeded, they would lose land, wealth, and influence. Opposition became fierce. Every debate inside the Senate grew more hostile. Supporters accused their opponents of greed. Opponents accused Tiberius of trying to become a tyrant. Soon, words were no longer enough. In 133 BC, Rome crossed a line from which it would never fully recover. During a public assembly on the Capitoline Hill, a group of senators and their followers armed themselves with wooden clubs, broken benches, and stones. They charged directly into the crowd. Chaos erupted. People screamed. Men were beaten to death in the streets. When the violence finally ended, Tiberius Gracchus lay dead. Hundreds of his supporters had been killed beside him. Their bodies were thrown into the Tiber River without ceremony.
For modern readers, the brutality is shocking, but for Romans, something even more horrifying had happened. Political murder had become acceptable. For centuries, disagreements had been settled through elections, speeches, and legal procedures. Now they were settled with clubs and blood. A dangerous precedent had been established. Several years later, Tiberius' younger brother, Gaius Gracchus, decided to continue the reforms. If anything, Gaius was even more ambitious. He introduced programs to provide affordable grain for the poor. He promoted the construction of roads and new colonies. He attempted to weaken the political monopoly of the Senate. His popularity exploded. Huge crowds gathered whenever he spoke. To many ordinary Romans, he represented hope. To the aristocracy, he represented an existential threat. The atmosphere inside Rome became increasingly tense. Armed supporters from rival political factions began appearing in the streets. Fights became common. Violence no longer shocked anyone. Eventually, the Senate issued an extraordinary emergency decree, effectively authorizing officials to eliminate anyone considered a threat to the Republic. It was the first time such power had been openly granted. Government-sanctioned violence had become law. Soon afterward, Gaius Gracchus found himself surrounded by enemies. Knowing capture meant certain execution, he ordered a trusted servant to kill him before his opponents could. His death did not end the bloodshed. Nearly 3,000 of his supporters were executed. Many families lost everything they owned. Property was confiscated. Homes were seized. Entire political networks disappeared almost overnight. The Republic had entered a new era. No one trusted political compromise anymore. Victory belonged to whoever controlled force. Yet an even greater transformation was already taking place far from the Senate. Rome's military was changing. For centuries, only property-owning citizens had served in the legions. Each soldier purchased his own armor and weapons. As small farmers disappeared, fewer qualified men remained. Rome faced a serious military crisis. Then a remarkable general stepped forward. His name was Gaius Marius. Unlike most leading politicians, Marius was not born into one of Rome's ancient noble families. He rose through talent, discipline, and extraordinary military skill. Realizing that the old system no longer worked, he introduced reforms that changed Roman history forever. For the first time, even the poorest citizens could join the army. The state supplied their weapons, armor, and equipment. The reforms made Rome's legions larger, stronger, and more professional than ever before. But they also created an unexpected danger. The soldiers' loyalty slowly shifted. Instead of serving the Republic above all else, many now served the general who promised them land, wealth, and glory after victory. The Republic did not yet realize it. But it had just created armies loyal to individual commanders rather than to the state itself. One day, those same armies would march not against foreign enemies, but against Rome. And when two extraordinary generals, Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla, finally turned against one another, the Roman Republic would descend into one of the bloodiest civil wars the ancient world had ever witnessed. By the end of the 2nd century BC, Rome was no longer the republic it had once been. Its borders still stretched across the Mediterranean. Merchants filled its ports with goods from every corner of the known world, and victorious legions continued to return home loaded with treasure. To outsiders, Rome looked stronger than ever, but beneath the marble temples and magnificent public buildings, the Republic was quietly falling apart. The deaths of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus had changed Roman politics forever. Violence had become an accepted tool of power. Political rivals no longer feared losing elections, they feared losing their lives. At the center of this new era stood one of Rome's greatest military heroes. His name was Gaius Marius. Marius had earned enormous popularity after defeating the Cimbri and Teutones, two powerful Germanic tribes whose invasion had threatened Italy itself. His victories saved Rome from what many believed could have been complete destruction. To ordinary citizens, he was a national hero. To many senators, however, he was becoming something far more dangerous. A man whose popularity rivaled the authority of the Republic itself. Serving alongside Marius during earlier campaigns had been another ambitious officer, a brilliant aristocrat named Lucius Cornelius Sulla.
At first, the two men respected each other. During the war against King Jugurtha of Numidia, Sulla played a crucial diplomatic role in capturing the enemy ruler alive. Many soldiers believed Sulla deserved much of the credit for ending the war. Instead, nearly all the glory went to Marius. Sulla never forgot the humiliation. It planted the seed of a rivalry that would eventually plunge Rome into civil war. As the years passed, both men became extraordinarily powerful, yet they represented very different visions of Rome. Marius relied on the support of popular politicians, veterans, and the urban poor.
Sulla became the favorite of many conservative senators who believed the traditional republic was under attack. The political divide grew deeper every year. Then events in the east changed everything. A new enemy emerged. His name was Mithridates VI, the ambitious king of Pontus. Brilliant, ruthless, and fiercely determined, Mithridates dreamed of driving Rome out of Asia Minor forever. His armies invaded Roman territory. Then came one of the most horrifying massacres in ancient history. According to ancient sources, Mithridates ordered the coordinated execution of Roman and Italian civilians living throughout Asia. Men, women, and children were hunted down in a single day. Ancient historians estimated that between 80,000 and 150,000 people were killed. Whether the exact numbers are accurate remains debated today, but the massacre shocked the Roman world. The Senate demanded revenge. A massive military expedition was organized. Command was awarded to Sulla.
For any Roman general, this was the greatest opportunity imaginable. Victory against Mithridates promised unimaginable wealth, military glory, and unmatched political influence. But just as Sulla prepared for the campaign, everything changed. A popular tribune introduced legislation transferring command from Sulla to the aging Marius. Despite his advanced age, Marius desperately wanted one final great victory. The political assembly approved the proposal. For Sulla, it was an unbearable insult. Years of preparation had been stolen by political maneuvering. He stood before his legions and faced a decision that no Roman commander had ever made before. The soldiers expected orders to march east. Instead, Sulla gave them an astonishing speech. He declared that Rome itself had been seized by corrupt politicians. He claimed the true enemies of the Republic were not in Asia, they were sitting inside Rome. The soldiers were stunned.
Roman armies were forbidden from entering the city under arms. The law existed for one reason. No general was ever supposed to use the army against his own people. Breaking that tradition was almost unthinkable. But these were no ordinary soldiers. Most had served with Sulla for years. They trusted their commander completely. They believed their future depended on him, not on politicians in the Senate. Then Sulla gave the order, march on Rome. History changed forever. In 88 BC, 6 Roman legions advanced toward their own capital. News spread through the countryside like wildfire. Many citizens refused to believe the reports. Roman soldiers attacking Rome? It seemed impossible. Yet before long, familiar standards appeared on the horizon. The Golden Eagles belonged not to foreign invaders, but to Rome's own army. Panic swept through the city. Some senators fled immediately. Others desperately attempted to organize resistance. Supporters of Marius erected barricades in the streets. Citizens climbed onto rooftops and hurled stones, roof tiles, and anything else they could find at the approaching soldiers. It made little difference. Professional legionaries moved forward with relentless discipline, street by street, building by building. Sulla ordered parts of the city set on fire to break resistance. For the first time in Roman history, organized Roman legions fought inside Rome itself. Sacred traditions had been shattered. Marius realized defeat was inevitable. Under cover of darkness, he escaped the city. What followed became one of Rome's most famous legends. The once glorious hero wandered through marshes and forests, hiding from those sent to kill him. At one point, according to ancient writers, he was captured by local authorities. A soldier entered the room with orders to execute him. Marius simply looked into the man's eyes and said, "Do you dare kill Gaius Marius?" Whether the story is true remains uncertain. But legend claims the soldier became so frightened that he fled without carrying out the execution. Meanwhile, Sulla restored his authority in Rome. The political decisions of his enemies were overturned. His command against Mithridates was reinstated. Soon afterward, he departed for Greece to wage war in the east. Many believed the crisis had ended. They could not have been more mistaken. The moment Sulla left Italy, his enemies struck back. Supporters of Marius seized control of Rome once again. Against all expectations, the old general returned, but he was no longer the celebrated hero who had once saved the Republic. Years of exile, betrayal, and humiliation had transformed him. He returned consumed by anger. This time he came not to reconcile, he came to take revenge. The executions began almost immediately. Anyone suspected of supporting Sulla became a target. Some senators were murdered during meetings, others were dragged from their homes, many disappeared without trial.
Ancient historians describe severed heads displayed publicly in the forum as warnings to anyone who might oppose the new regime. Fear consumed the city. Ordinary Romans no longer cared which faction claimed to defend the Republic. They simply hoped to survive until the next change of power. Then, unexpectedly, everything changed once again. Only days after beginning his 7th consulship, Gaius Marius died. Some believed illness finally claimed him. Others suggested years of warfare had destroyed both his body and his mind. His death left Rome leaderless, but peace did not follow. Instead, everyone knew what was coming. Far away in the east, Sulla had completed a brilliant military campaign against Mithridates. His battle-hardened veterans had grown wealthy through conquest.
More importantly, they remained absolutely loyal to their commander. As Sulla prepared to sail back to Italy, the entire Republic held its breath. Everyone understood one terrifying truth. Rome's bloodiest civil war had not yet begun. It was only about to begin. And this time, Sulla would return with a single purpose: to eliminate every enemy who had ever stood against him.
In 83 BC, the Roman Republic stood on the edge of total collapse. The streets of Rome were filled with uncertainty. Every rumor spoke of war. Every traveler arriving from southern Italy brought stories of marching legions, burning towns, and armies gathering for one final confrontation. Across the sea, Lucius Cornelius Sulla had returned from the east. He had defeated King Mithridates. He had enriched his soldiers with enormous spoils of war. Most importantly, he now commanded an army that was completely loyal to him. These were not ordinary recruits. They were seasoned veterans, men who had survived years of brutal campaigning. They had crossed mountains, stormed fortresses, and fought countless battles under Sulla's command. To them he was more than a general. He was the man who had made them rich, the man who had kept them alive, the man they trusted above all others. Waiting for him in Italy were the supporters of the late Gaius Marius. Although Marius himself was dead, his political faction still controlled much of the Republic. Both sides knew there could be no compromise. One would survive, the other would be destroyed. Italy quickly descended into civil war once again. Cities were forced to choose sides. Some opened their gates to Sulla without resistance, hoping to avoid destruction. Others prepared for sieges. Entire communities found themselves divided. Families argued, friends became enemies. No one knew who would emerge victorious. Unlike Rome's wars against foreign kingdoms, this conflict was especially brutal. Every soldier understood he was fighting fellow Romans. Former comrades now stood on opposite sides of the battlefield. Many had once served together under the same eagle standards. Now they met as enemies. Villages were burned, harvests were destroyed, food supplies disappeared. Thousands of civilians fled their homes as armies marched across the Italian countryside. But the Republic itself was tearing apart. During this campaign, Sulla gained several remarkable young allies. One of them was a 23-year-old nobleman named Gnaeus Pompeius, later known to history as Pompey the Great. Although still very young, Pompey raised several legions using his family's influence and marched to join Sulla. His courage immediately impressed the older commander. Another important supporter was Marcus Licinius Crassus. Years earlier, Crassus had lost members of his family during the Marian purges. His property had been confiscated. He had spent years in hiding. Now he returned, determined to take revenge. Neither Pompey nor Crassus could have imagined that one day they would become two of the most powerful men in Rome. For now, they shared only one objective: victory. The civil war reached its climax in 82 BC outside the Colline Gate, one of the northern entrances to Rome. It would become one of the bloodiest battles in Republican history.
Sulla's army approached the capital. Waiting outside the walls stood a massive coalition of Marian forces supported by the Samnites, an ancient Italian people who had hated Rome for generations. For centuries, the Samnites had fought against Roman expansion. Now they saw one final opportunity. Ancient historians record that one Samnite commander declared before the battle, "As long as Rome stands, Italy will never be free." The fighting began before sunset. It continued throughout the night. The battlefield became a nightmare. Thousands of Roman soldiers clashed beneath torchlight. The screams of wounded men echoed across the fields outside the city walls. At one point, Sulla's right wing began to collapse. Enemy troops pushed forward relentlessly. Panic spread among his soldiers. Even Sulla himself came dangerously close to defeat. Then, on the opposite flank, Marcus Crassus launched a devastating counterattack. His forces broke through the enemy line. The Marian army suddenly found itself attacked from the side. Confusion turned into panic. By sunrise, the battle was over. The fields around Rome were covered with thousands of dead Romans. The Republic had survived another day, but it had done so by destroying itself. Sulla entered Rome as the unquestioned master of the state. There was no one left capable of challenging him. Many citizens hoped the nightmare had finally ended. Instead, the terror was only beginning. Sulla had no intention of forgiving his enemies. He intended to erase them completely. Soon afterward, he introduced one of the darkest political systems in Roman history, the proscriptions. Large wooden boards appeared in the Roman Forum. On them were written long lists of names. Anyone whose name appeared on those lists was instantly declared an enemy of the state. No trial, no defense, no appeal. Anyone could kill them. Even worse, the killer would receive a financial reward. If a slave murdered his own master whose name appeared on the list, he would receive both freedom and money. Greed spread through the city like a disease. Neighbors betrayed neighbors. Business partners betrayed one another. Old friendships disappeared overnight. Some sons even betrayed their own fathers to protect themselves or inherit family property. Rome became a city where trust no longer existed. Every knock at the door could mean death. Many victims tried to flee. Some disguised themselves as servants. Others hid in forests, caves, or abandoned farms. Very few escaped. After each execution, the victim's property was confiscated by the state. Homes, vineyards, businesses, entire estates. Everything was sold at incredibly low prices. Many ambitious Romans became wealthy almost overnight. Among them was Marcus Crassus. By purchasing confiscated properties for a fraction of their value, he built one of the greatest fortunes in Roman history. Ancient writers estimated that at least 5,000 people were officially executed during the proscriptions. The true number was almost certainly much higher. The atmosphere inside Rome became unbearable. One day, according to tradition, a senator finally gathered enough courage to ask Sulla, "When will the executions end?" Sulla calmly replied, "I have not yet decided whom I wish to spare." The answer spread throughout the city. It perfectly captured the fear under which Romans now lived. Soon afterward, the Senate formally appointed Sulla as dictator. But this was unlike any dictatorship Rome had ever known. Traditionally, dictators served only 6 months during national emergencies. Sulla received unlimited authority. He could issue laws without approval. He could confiscate property. He could execute citizens. He could reshape the republic however he wished. In practice, Rome had ceased to function as a true republic. One man now held absolute power. Ironically, Sulla insisted that everything he was doing was intended to save the republic. He strengthened the Senate, reduced the power of popular tribunes, reorganized the courts, introduced constitutional reforms designed to prevent future political instability. But history would prove him tragically wrong. Instead of protecting the republic, Sulla had shown future generals exactly how to seize complete control. Raise a loyal army, march on Rome, destroy your enemies, take power.
Future generations would remember that lesson well. Among the young Romans quietly watching these events was an ambitious nobleman who had narrowly escaped Sulla's death lists. Years earlier, Sulla had ordered him to divorce his wife because of her family's connection to Gaius Marius. The young man refused. Forced into hiding, he survived only because influential friends persuaded Sulla to spare his life. That young aristocrat was named Gaius Julius Caesar. Few people noticed him at the time. Fewer still could imagine that one day he would repeat Sulla's march on Rome and bring the Roman Republic to its final end.
Nearly 30 years had passed since Sulla's dictatorship. On the surface, Rome appeared to have recovered. Its armies continued conquering new lands, trade flourished across the Mediterranean, magnificent temples, theaters, and public buildings rose throughout the city, celebrating the Republic's power and prosperity. But beneath that prosperity, the foundations of the Republic had been permanently weakened. Sulla had unintentionally taught every ambitious general one dangerous lesson. A loyal army could be more powerful than the laws of Rome. No one learned that lesson better than Gaius Julius Caesar. As a young man, Caesar had barely escaped Sulla's proscriptions. Now he had become one of the Republic's brightest political stars. He possessed extraordinary intelligence, unmatched charisma, and remarkable military talent. Most importantly, he understood people. He knew how to inspire soldiers. He knew how to captivate crowds. He knew how to turn victories into political power. Yet Caesar did not rise alone. By the middle of the 1st century BC, Roman politics had come under the influence of three extraordinary men. Together they formed what history calls the First Triumvirate. It included Gnaeus Pompey the Great, Rome's greatest living general and conqueror of the East, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Roman history, and Julius Caesar, an ambitious politician with dreams far greater than anyone realized. Officially, the triumvirate did not exist. It was a private agreement. Each man supported the ambitions of the others. Pompey secured land for his veterans. Crassus protected his financial interests. Caesar received command of Roman Gaul. That decision would change history forever. For nearly 10 years, Caesar campaigned across Gaul, corresponding largely to modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Germany. Again and again, he defeated tribes that vastly outnumbered his own forces. He crossed the Rhine River twice, demonstrating that even the Germanic tribes beyond its waters were not beyond Rome's reach. He launched 2 expeditions into Britain, becoming the first Roman commander to set foot on the island. Every campaign brought victory, every victory brought wealth, every victory increased Caesar's fame. His soldiers adored him. They followed him through freezing winters, endless marches, and impossible battles. To them, Caesar was more than a commander. He was the man who shared their hardships, the man who rewarded their loyalty, the man who never accepted defeat. Meanwhile, events in Rome were moving in a different direction. In 53 BC, Marcus Crassus launched an invasion of the Parthian Empire. It ended in disaster. At the Battle of Carrhae, the Parthian cavalry destroyed the Roman army. Crassus was killed. According to one famous tradition, the Parthians poured molten gold into his mouth to mock his greed. Modern historians debate whether this actually happened, but the story became one of the most enduring legends of antiquity. With Crassus gone, the balance of power collapsed. Only 2 giants remained, Pompey and Caesar. At first, both men tried to avoid direct conflict, but many senators had grown deeply concerned by Caesar's growing popularity. His victories in Gaul had made him unimaginably wealthy. His soldiers were fiercely loyal. Some feared he would become another Sulla, or something even more dangerous. The Senate demanded that Caesar surrender his command, disband his legions, and return to Rome as a private citizen. On paper, the order was perfectly legal, but Caesar understood its true meaning. Without his army, he would stand alone against political enemies eager to prosecute him. His career would end, his influence would disappear, his life itself might be in danger. There were only 2 choices: obey or rebel. In January of 49 BC, Caesar reached a small river marking the boundary between his province and Italy. The river was called the Rubicon. Roman law forbade any general from crossing it while leading an army. Doing so was considered an act of rebellion against the Republic. Caesar paused. His officers waited silently. Every soldier understood the importance of the moment. If they crossed that river, there would be no turning back. According to ancient tradition, Caesar looked ahead and declared, "The die is cast."
Then he rode forward. The 13th legion followed. The Roman civil war had begun. News spread across Italy with astonishing speed. Panic erupted in Rome. Many senators fled immediately. Pompey withdrew south, hoping to gather the overwhelming military strength of the eastern provinces. Caesar moved with incredible speed. Town after town opened its gates without resistance. Entire garrisons switched sides rather than fight him. Within weeks, Caesar entered Rome almost unopposed, but the decisive battle was still ahead. Pompey crossed the Adriatic Sea into Greece, where he assembled an enormous army drawn from across the eastern Mediterranean. On paper, he possessed every advantage: more infantry, more cavalry, more supplies. Many believed Caesar's defeat was inevitable. The two armies finally met in 48 BC near the Greek town of Pharsalus. Pompey commanded nearly twice as many soldiers. His cavalry vastly outnumbered Caesar's horsemen. His officers were confident. Some reportedly discussed how they would celebrate victory before the battle had even begun. Caesar, however, had anticipated Pompey's strategy. He secretly placed a reserve of elite legionaries behind his cavalry. When Pompey's horsemen charged, expecting an easy victory, Caesar unleashed his hidden force. The surprise attack shattered Pompey's cavalry. Within minutes, his entire left flank collapsed. Confusion spread rapidly through his ranks. The disciplined veterans of Caesar's legions advanced relentlessly. By the end of the day, Pompey's magnificent army had ceased to exist. Thousands of Romans once again lay dead at the hands of fellow Romans. Pompey fled to Egypt. He believed the young king Ptolemy XIII would offer him protection. Instead, the Egyptian court made a fatal calculation. They believed killing Pompey would earn Caesar's gratitude. As Pompey stepped into a small boat near the Egyptian shore, assassins attacked. The former master of the Roman world was stabbed to death before he even reached land. He was 58 years old. His head was severed and preserved. Several days later, Caesar arrived in Egypt. The Egyptians proudly presented Pompey's head as a gift. They expected praise. Instead, according to ancient historians, Caesar turned away in horror. Despite years of rivalry and civil war, Pompey had once been his friend, ally, and son-in-law. Caesar reportedly wept. He ordered Pompey to receive an honorable burial worthy of a Roman general. At last, it seemed the war was over, but victory created a new fear. Many senators believed Caesar had become too powerful. He had defeated every rival. He had been named dictator for life. To the Romans, the title of king was almost unthinkable. For nearly 500 years, they had prided themselves on having overthrown their last monarch. Now many believed Caesar intended to restore monarchy under a different name. Inside the Senate, a secret conspiracy slowly took shape. Its members convinced themselves that they were saving the Republic. They believed that killing one man would preserve Roman liberty forever. Instead, they were about to unleash the final and most devastating civil war in Roman history. History remembers this day as the Ides of March. Rome awoke like any other morning. Merchants opened their stalls in the forum. Craftsmen prepared their workshops. Senators made their way toward an important meeting that would be held in the theater of Pompey, while the Senate house was under renovation. No one walking through the streets that morning could have imagined they were about to witness the beginning of the end of the Roman Republic. Julius Caesar, recently appointed dictator for life, made his way toward the Senate. Along the route, according to several ancient writers, someone handed him a written warning, revealing that a conspiracy was about to unfold. Caesar accepted the note, but he never found the time to read it. Confident in his position and surrounded by familiar faces, he continued walking toward the meeting. Inside, more than 60 senators were waiting. Many of them owed their careers and even their lives to Caesar. Some had fought against him during the civil war and had been forgiven. Others had risen to power because of his generosity. Yet together they had reached one conclusion: if Caesar lived, the Republic would die. The conspirators were terrified. Each understood that failure meant certain execution. When the meeting began, one senator approached Caesar with what appeared to be a simple request. It was merely a distraction. Suddenly, another senator grabbed Caesar's toga. Before he could react, the first dagger struck.
The wound was not fatal. Caesar attempted to defend himself. For a brief moment he struggled against his attackers. Then more blades appeared, one after another, from every direction. The conspirators surrounded him completely. According to the ancient historian Suetonius, Caesar suffered 23 stab wounds. Ironically, only one proved fatal. Several senators were so overwhelmed by panic that they accidentally wounded one another during the attack. As Caesar realized there was no escape, he reportedly saw one familiar face among the assassins: Marcus Junius Brutus, a man he deeply trusted, perhaps even loved like a son. The famous phrase "Et tu, Brute," "You too, Brutus," has echoed through history ever since. Whether Caesar actually spoke those words remains uncertain, ancient sources disagree, but the legend became one of history's greatest symbols of betrayal. Moments later, Julius Caesar collapsed at the foot of a statue of Pompey, the very man he had defeated only a few years earlier. To many Romans, the irony seemed almost supernatural. The greatest conqueror of his age had died beneath the image of his former rival. The conspirators expected to be celebrated as liberators. Instead, Rome fell into chaos. News of Caesar's assassination spread rapidly throughout the city. Some citizens celebrated, others mourned. Most simply feared what would happen next.
Within days, one man stepped forward to seize control of the situation: Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted friend, brilliant cavalry commander, and political ally. At Caesar's funeral, Antony delivered one of the most influential speeches in history. Rather than demanding revenge outright, he spoke quietly, carefully. He showed the crowd Caesar's blood-stained toga. He pointed to each tear left by the assassins' knives. Then he revealed Caesar's final will. Every Roman citizen, Antony announced, had been left a personal financial gift. Caesar had also donated his private gardens to the people of Rome. The crowd exploded with rage. Thousands of mourners gathered benches, furniture, and wooden structures from nearby buildings. They piled them together in the forum, creating an enormous funeral pyre. As Caesar's body was consumed by flames, cries for vengeance echoed through the streets. The assassins realized they had made a terrible mistake. Instead of saving the Republic,
they had ignited another civil war. Brutus, Cassius, and the other conspirators fled Rome. But an even greater surprise soon arrived. Far away, a quiet 18-year-old nobleman received shocking news. His name was Gaius Octavius. Caesar's will revealed that the young man had been legally adopted as his son and primary heir. From that moment forward, he became known as Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, Octavian. Almost no one took him seriously. Experienced politicians believed they could manipulate the inexperienced teenager. They underestimated him completely. Behind his calm appearance was one of the greatest political minds Rome had ever produced. Within months, Octavian had begun building alliances, recruiting soldiers, and carefully positioning himself as Caesar's rightful successor. Eventually, he joined forces with Mark Antony and Marcus Lepidus. Together, they created the Second Triumvirate. Unlike the informal alliance that had once united Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, this new triumvirate possessed legal authority backed by the Roman state. Its first objective was simple: destroy every enemy. Soon, Rome witnessed the return of one of its darkest traditions, the proscriptions. Lists of condemned citizens appeared once again. Thousands were sentenced to death without trial. Friends betrayed friends. Families betrayed relatives. Old political rivalries ended in murder. One of the most famous victims was Marcus Tullius Cicero, Rome's greatest orator. Cicero attempted to flee. Assassins caught him before he escaped. According to tradition, he calmly stretched out his neck and accepted his fate. After his execution, his head and hands were displayed in the Roman Forum, the very place where he had once delivered speeches defending the Republic. It was a chilling symbol. The voice of Republican liberty had been silenced forever. Meanwhile, the armies of the Second Triumvirate hunted Caesar's assassins across the eastern Mediterranean. The decisive confrontation came in 42 BC near the Macedonian city of Philippi. After two brutal battles, the forces of Brutus and Cassius were completely defeated. Both men chose suicide rather than capture. The conspirators were gone. But peace still did not come. The alliance between Antony and Octavian soon began to crumble. Two men remained, only one could rule Rome. Mark Antony established himself in Egypt alongside Queen Cleopatra VII. Together they became one of history's most famous couples. To many Romans, however, Antony appeared increasingly loyal to Egypt rather than Rome. Octavian used this brilliantly. Through an enormous propaganda campaign, he convinced the Roman people that Antony intended to abandon Roman traditions and create an Eastern monarchy beside Cleopatra. Whether entirely true or not, the message worked. War became inevitable. In 31 BC, the rival fleets met off the western coast of Greece at the Battle of Actium. Hundreds of warships collided in one of antiquity's greatest naval battles. Flaming arrows filled the sky, rams smashed into wooden hulls, smoke covered the sea. As the fighting intensified, Cleopatra's fleet unexpectedly withdrew from the battle. Seeing her departure, Antony abandoned the fight and followed. The remaining fleet collapsed. Octavian had won. 1 year later, Roman forces entered Alexandria. Believing Cleopatra had already died, Antony fell upon his own sword. Soon afterward, Cleopatra herself died. Ancient tradition claims she allowed an asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra, to bite her, although modern historians continue to debate exactly how she died. With Antony and Cleopatra gone, no rival remained. Nearly a century of civil wars had finally come to an end. In 27 BC, the Roman Senate granted Octavian a new honorific title, Augustus. Officially, the Republic still existed. The Senate continued to meet, consuls were still elected, republican institutions survived in name, but reality had changed forever. All real power now rested in the hands of one man. The Roman Empire had been born. The civil wars had claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Entire regions of Italy had been devastated. Families had been destroyed. Cities had been divided. Generals had repeatedly marched against their own homeland. And the Republic, once built upon shared laws and civic duty, had slowly dissolved beneath the weight of ambition and bloodshed. Perhaps the greatest irony is that nearly every leader involved claimed to be fighting to save Rome. Marius said he defended the people. Sulla claimed he defended the constitution. Pompey believed he defended the Senate. Caesar insisted he defended justice. Brutus declared he defended liberty. Antony fought for Caesar's legacy. Octavian promised peace. Yet together they destroyed the very republic each claimed to protect. Rome was not conquered by a foreign empire. It was transformed by its own citizens. The greatest civilization of the ancient world did not fall because its enemies were stronger. It changed because ambition overcame law. Loyalty gave way to personal power, and Romans turned their swords against fellow Romans. Thus ended one of history's most tragic chapters, a century of civil wars that buried the Roman Republic and gave birth to an empire that would dominate the Western world for centuries to come.